Then did you come back and teach?
Yes, after I had been gone for 3 years.
And what did you do in those 3 years to help the war effort?
Well, during the war effort, I was at UNM. And UNM really, we had, there too, I finished in 3 years because of the war effort. We didn't have holidays, we didn't have, and semesters ran very close, like 3 semesters to a year rather than the usual 2. But we had school. We didn't have Easter vacation or Christmas vacation, just Christmas Day, Thanksgiving Day. So I would stay in Albuquerque on the campus, I remember, and keep up with my courses, and they went fast. So I finished UNM in 3 years, and I was only 20 years old.
And when you left, so you graduated from high school when you were about 17.
Yes.
And so then that would have made that like 1940. And then you graduated in 43. Did you work for the United Nations as a
no, it wasn't the United Nations. It was the Institute of International Education, which is still very, very big now. They say I wouldn't know it if I went back to New York City. Its headquarters are in New York City, and it's backed by it's privately endowed, and the government does put its bit into it. I don't know in what way. But the Rockefeller Foundation, the Andrews Foundation, the, what is that other called?
Andrew Mellon?
The Mellon Foundation, yes. All of those foundations gave an awful lot of money to the International Institute to bring foreign students into the United States and to bring them from everywhere. So when I worked for the Institute, I was hired right after I graduated from UNM, and I went to New York, and I worked in what they call the Latin American division of the Institute of International Education. Today they say it's so huge that I wouldn't recognize it, but at that time it was close-knit, and there was a Western European division, an Eastern European division, the Latin America, South America, Central America, and then but Mexico and the United States were all together, and Canada was together with the United States too. They didn't make it a separate entity.
Did you translate?
I did a lot of, that was one of my main things to do, translate and proofread. And I would proofread line after line and do on the margins. Now I don't think I could do it, but that's what I did when I was young.
So once you left Monticello and you graduated roughly in 1940 from Monticello, did you have a graduation?
1942.
1942. Did you have a graduation commencement?
Yes, and they had me join the graduates that were in line to be graduated that year. Here I had come from TRC, and I had my transcript and everything, and Mr. Farmer said, well, there's a war going on, he said, and I think that you even have one more credit, he said, than you need. So it's better that you graduate and see what you're going to do. And he gave me a lot of thinking to do, because he was very concerned about us and what was going to happen to the high school in Monticello at that time. And he advised me, so I went to my mom and dad and I told them, and they were real surprised. Well, how come? How come? And I said, well, because I've gone to summer school all these summers. And Mr. Stewart had something to do with keeping me in summer school. So he even wrote a letter when he sent my transcript, saying everything about how it had happened. So then I graduated with Flavio and Esther and Candy Romero, who were the real seniors, and Elvira Trujillo. All of them have died, ironically, now. See?
That was Flavio Luna.
And Esther Chavez, she is alive yet. She lives in Arizona. And Elvira Trujillo died. She was a Cedillo. And Rosella, I think she's alive. She lives in Albuquerque. And she's a Chavez now, but she was a Tafoya. And there was one girl, Laura Jean Ridgway, who was my real buddy. She and I were real friends. because she would come into Tiercy and end up in school there, go back to Monticello, and we'd end up there, the two of us. So, and I don't know what happened to her during the war. I didn't hear from her anymore.
At that time, there was what, about 18 to 20 school districts in Sierra County?
Yes. Even Cheese had a school.
And then they would all go to like Monticello for high school.
For high school, yes.
Or they would come here to
Tiercy.
Tiercy.
And they used to tell me that before then, before Monticello had a high school, they had to live in Hillsboro and go to Hillsboro. Some of the older teachers I met later had attended high school in Hillsboro, like Mr. Torres and Sam Garcia and Don Montoya from Las Palomas. They had all gone to Hillsboro to high school. But then some of their children went to Monticello to high school.
What do you remember about the mineral baths and about downtown Tiercy in the
Not
30s?
too much.
Why not?
Because we wouldn't venture to downtown Tiercy. Where we lived, you know, they kind of kept us close to home. It seemed like that was a dangerous thing to do, you know, to venture into the town. So, but I used to like to skate. And I had this real good friend, Jane Stiles, who still lives around somewhere. And eventually, sometimes she comes to Tiercy. And she had another friend, Laverne Ward, and they had skates. So at somebody was moving somewhere, and my mom bought me a pair of skates, so I'd bring them. And where Dr. Maloney used to have his old office, remember it was a long building right by the Civic Center, right by the Convention Center now, but more to the north of it. And it had a long sidewalk. That was the only building that had a long, narrow sidewalk. And his windows faced that sidewalk. So we'd put on our skates and go skating there until he would come out and chase us because we made noise. In later years, when I was his patient, he'd say, "You better behave or I'll chase you again."
How old were you when you were using your skates on the sidewalk?
Oh, we were still very, like in 5th grade.
So you were probably about,
like that.
about 1935, and you were
Yeah.
about 12 years old, 11, 34, 35.
34, 35, that was it. And then sometimes they'd let us go to the movies, but we had to have an older person with us. So that would be my cousin Flora, the one that I tell you was my mentor. Flora took care of us, and Stella took care of us. If they went, then we could go to the movies. If they didn't go, we couldn't go.
Where were the
The
movie
movies
houses?
were, remember the old movie house that was on right as you come down the hill?
El Cortez?
Yeah, and it was the only movie house, but it was there for years and years. Even during the war, it was still there, and later. And that's where we would go to the movies, and they were black and white, you know. It was not till Albuquerque that I saw the other kind.
When you were in college up in Albuquerque, you saw
At
color
UNM.
movies.
Vidal, one time you told me, I think it was you, could have been somebody else, about taking your grandmother to the bathhouse there.
Yes, it was my grandma Vidal, and my uncle thought that it would help her. And I remember that we went into this bathhouse that had little steps, and you'd go in kind of deep, and it was very, 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 very close, but the water came up quite a bit high. And I remember that we took a little coffee can, and Flora, this other cousin of mine, and I got in with her, and we poured this bath water on her back and wet her hair, and then we got her all wrapped up, and my uncle helped us take her home. And when we got home, then we had to give her another bath in one of the tin tubs. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'll never volunteer for this again.
Was there mud on the floor when you walked down the steps?
No, it was more like a sandy gravel, I remember. And I remember that the water stayed almost at the same level all of the time. And it was just a little tiny bathhouse.
And you don't remember where it was?
Yes, right there by where the little springs are now.
Oh, okay.
Right there. And it was a little building, and it was it had a roof and everything, you know. And you could tell that that in days of old they still had those posts where they used to park the tie the horses,
Hitching posts.
the hitching posts to the side. Now today, of course, that's all cement, but at that time it was all hilly there. In one of those houses that faces the hill, I mean, it was on halfway up the hill. I think today it's been destroyed, but it belonged to this family called Alderete, Alderete, and her name was Tomasita, something like that. And she was related to my grandpa's Montoyas. So we had someone up there that we could visit, but I don't remember anything else except that that her house was a 2-story house, and that it overlooked. They must have been merchants or something to have had that kind of a house there. Later, it was owned by the Smiths and a lot of other people that I don't remember.
Do you remember any other neighborhood landmarks in that area as a child in TRC or in Hot Springs?
I remember the old hotel, the one that was, what was it?
The Arizona? The Vera?
Yeah, I remember the Arizona, I remember the Vera, but I remember more this one that was close to what is now Main. It would have been its background to Main Street. And there's still it's still a hotel or a motel, but at that time it was a bigger hotel. And
Was that the Vera? Up there on Main Street across from
no,
Pelosa?
I remember the Vera, yes. In fact, that's where our Baca relatives, when they came from Socorro, would stay at the Vera. And so that's how come we got to see a hotel in reality, because we had never seen one. But this other one was more like it was more like a southwestern style, and even today that motel still holds that. But it's when you come off the public library and you make the turn, and you have a stop. Huh?
The Odell Apartments?
Yeah, the Odell.
Oh, okay.
But it was a hotel. It seemed in earlier days, and it was real picturesque. Somehow it impressed me more than the Vera or the Arizona.
Do you remember
But
the
I don't
Buena
know.
Vista?
Yes, I remember the Buena Vista too. But I don't connect it with having done something there. Like I remember the Vera because of our guests being there, and we'd go see them. See, they were ancestors to Alfego Vaca. See, the descendants of the clan of Alfego Vaca.
Do you remember the playgrounds besides with skates? What else did you do?
They had a roller rink that was by the river, and they only held it open on Saturday, Sunday, and most of the young people were at the roller rink from 4 o'clock on, and it was right there by the river where the park is.
Now it's where Southwest Counseling is, I believe.
There was a platform, a huge roller rink, I remember, and that was one of the neat things that the young people could do, besides what the churches had. Most of the activities were sponsored by the church groups. The Catholic Church, I remember, had a Father Blanchard who was young, and he liked to sponsor youth groups, and we always had activities going on while he was there. And I was just lucky to have been there at that time. Later, I don't know what happened.